at any given time, the best leader will have a 48% approval rating. If you're making a decision that goes to the right level, 48% of your team is going to hate you. 48% of your team is going to say, this is great. And 4% aren't going to know what to do about it. If I were to introduce a new solution to my team and all 10 of my leaders stood up and clapped and said, this is the best idea we've ever heard, then I did something wrong.
Welcome to In Good Company, elder care in your backyard.
You have this rare combination of psychology, business training, and cardiovascular mainline services. What drew you to blend these worlds together?
So I actually started at the University of Missouri as pre-med. I was very interested in genetics. And it really intrigued me. But I remember some of my roommates had this excellent idea that we would all take a social psychology class together. And the great thing was it was in a big lecture hall that had this kind of, the top row had tables with these like rolling chairs. And we were just immature enough to want to take full advantage of that instead of sitting in the regular desk. It was also right across from the student union, and we would go in there and get the Pizza Hut cinnamon sticks. And so we would all go in there and sit in the back row in our rolling chairs and eat cinnamon sticks. This was my roommates and I's great idea. And I thought it was just going to be a blow-off class. At that time, I really didn't have a lot of interest in psychology. And I remember just hearing a couple different stories from just social psychology research. And I was like, holy, people are so interesting. And it really kind of got me thinking about psychology. I ended up switching my major. So this class that I went into for cinnamon sticks and rolling chairs and a blow-off class turned into be the thing that caused me to change my major. So I get into graduate school. I decide I'm going to do forensics and neuropsychology. I do my internship with the federal prison system, and I'm all over, and came back to Springfield, decided to not do the prison system thing, but ended up coming to work as a psychologist at Cox Health. And I was walking down the hall one day, and I was talking to a friend of mine, who's he's now the CMO at the hospital. And we were walking down the hall. He was a hospitalist at the time, and he stepped in. Cox Health was having a career fair, or like an education fair. And he steps in the education fair room, and I followed him in, and I was like, what are you doing in here? You're already a doctor. And he goes, yeah, but I really want to advance my career. And honestly, something that had never crossed my mind. And went over and talked to the MSU people, and ended up signing up that day for the master's in business classes, and ended up doing that. They moved me over into administration. And to me, it's the right mix of, I'm a data-driven analytics achiever, right? So for me, if you give me a task, I'm going to do it, and I'm not going to stop till it's done. That's what gets me excited is, here's the goal. I'm going to, I tell my team, if the goal is X, our goal is X plus 1, right? That's how we approach every problem. But when I've had people that are, since I moved into administration and stopped doing clinical work, they've asked me like, do you miss it? And I tell them, I was like, I do more psychology now than I ever did when I was running my own practice. And it really is, you've got individual personalities of the providers. You've got individual personalities of all the staff. You've got individual personalities of my leadership team. And then somehow you have to get all of them to move in the same direction.
Yeah.
And to me, it's that ultimate blend of going all the way back to that social psychology class and just hearing all the different ways that humans behave in social settings, combining that with really what drives me. And at Cox Health, we talk a lot about what is your why, right? What gets you up in the morning to do this? And for me, it's always been about helping people. So I have, since I've finished college, I have never worked for a place that either wasn't a government organization or a not-for-profit. I've never worked for a for-profit company. Helping people is always, now, not to say that for-profit companies don't help, but it's just like, that's just kind of in what I do is so in administration, I get to be close enough to the decisions that when I lead my team, the things that we decide to do impact thousands of people. But at the same time, I get to be that kind of analytics, decision maker, psychology, kind of all at once. And my vice president jokes that the cardiology team was in a place where they needed a psychologist to come in and be the leader. And I joke with them a lot. I'm like, yeah, I do a lot of psychology with you guys on a regular basis. So to me, it's just a great marriage of what I first thought I wanted to do, pre-med, being interested in the medicine piece, switching to psychology. To me, hospital administration is that blend of both. And that's what I really get excited about.
Yeah, from a leadership standpoint, there is a bit of a myth out there that, they assume that the cardiology services is managed by a cardiologist, but they're two different, about as different a jobs as you could imagine.
Right.
And the skill sets needed to be a great leader and a great manager, they don't require you to be able to go in and do a heart surgery,
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things I think that's really challenging for people who are in healthcare. I've noticed that, like, I kind of got thrown into management early in my career. Mm-hmm. I was a terrible manager. I'll admit that right off the bat. Yeah. I was terrible at it. I had zero training in it. Nobody taught me how to be a manager. Yeah. And so naturally I was really bad at it. And, it took a lot of reading books and going to conferences and, having experiences with bad bosses and having experiences with great bosses to understand what I wanted to be as a leader and as a manager myself. What things did you feel like when you came to the table as a leader and a manager in Cox that you felt benefited you the most?
So I think my psychology training was, I don't know how I would do my job now if the only training I had on this was my business classes, my MBA classes. And again, that's not to say that we didn't have classes on leadership. We did, but it's kind of the way I've described it to people is, physicians, when they are going through medical school, they might have a 6-month rotation in psychiatry. They can then, when they're licensed, they can then prescribe psychiatric medications. But does that mean they should? Right. And I, in my business classes, right, I had a class on leadership. But would that have made me a leader if I didn't have any of my other background? And I would say absolutely not. I would have been completely unprepared if I'd have walked in. When I go back to it, I think a lot back to my psychology classes on the social psychology side, but also spending years in graduate school learning about things like empathy and, emotional intelligence. And, when I was in grad school, we may not have necessarily learned it under that phrase of emotional intelligence, but we certainly learned all the components of what went into that. And now that term has really become popularized over the last 10 or 15 years, that was such a big part of my training. And so I think what has served me well in leadership is there's going to be time when people disagree with you. And how you approach them, how you approach their disagreement, in that moment, there's not one situation. You're probably dealing with 3, maybe 4 situations, right? It's them with you with the situation, you with the outcome, them with the outcome. And if you approach it as there's only one pathway instead of there's actually 4 or 5 things going on, you're going to create a great resolution for one thing and you're going to upset the other 3 or 4.
Right.
And I think the education on emotional intelligence helps me really take a step back and think, what's kind of the best outcome that we would get? And then how do you work back from that? I tell my leaders a lot of times, the best leaders, or at least, again, my opinion on what makes the best leader is at any given time, the best leader will have a 48% approval rating. Because if you're making a decision that goes to the right level, 48% of your team is going to hate you. 48% of your team is going to say, this is great. And 4% aren't going to know what to do about it. Right. And so I think if I were to introduce a new solution to my team and all 10 of my leaders stood up and clapped and said, this is the best idea we've ever heard, then I did something wrong. There is no way that what I just proposed to them is good enough, because either I didn't push it far enough or something. But if you're not challenging the team enough to where you're making some of them uncomfortable, then I don't think you're going far enough. And so, but how you manage that, and to add to that, so I am every quarter we do a kind of a leader kind of training and education for all of the new leaders in the system. And my senior vice president asked me to be a regular part of that curriculum, particularly on how to manage through difficult conversations and how to build teamwork and build culture. And what I tell them is, if you'd asked me when I first started in leadership what my job was, I'd say build culture, right? I don't think that way anymore. If you were to ask me at my highest aspiration as a leader, what is my role? It's change management. Because I think when you can lead people through change, that's what builds culture. I don't think you can just go in and say, hey, everyone, we're going to have a really good culture. Culture is, in my mind, the outcome of something that is done. And so if you go in and you can lead people through change and develop trust and have success, I think people will then start to follow you. And again, I told you earlier, I'm a big Civil War guy, right? So, kind of my analogy here is, Stonewall Jackson was a Confederate general, and his men didn't particularly like him. He made them do long marches. They tended to be underfed and underprovisioned, but they followed him all over the Western Front because he developed a reputation for winning. And when he demanded all of this of them and they would win battles, they were more likely to follow him. And again, I'm using that as a reference of when you push people and then you bring them success, that develops that culture. And so again, I think as we look at what is the best part of leadership for me is, if I can lead my team through change, and healthcare is nothing if not change. If I can lead them through that and give them success, then the next challenge that comes up, I can push them even harder, because now we've got that culture developed where when we all do this together, it brings us success. The higher you scaffold that, the more you can push them the next time.
So true. It's so much in there. And one of the things that I talk to my leadership team about is, when you talk about culture, that culture is, it's one of these terms that is kind of like people like to throw around, but not everybody really knows what exactly that means. Right. They're like, well, okay, what is that? Everybody's happy? No. I mean, is it that, and so what I tell my team is that I can say what I want our culture to be, but culture is everybody who has a direct report has their own culture with that person. Within our environment, we've got, 20-something people who have direct reports, and each one of them has their own little culture. That employee and that supervisor have an experience with each other. And we talk about caring culture, caring coaching here, and that, our number one core value is to seek personal and professional growth, and that you're a coach and you're supposed to help them get there one way or another. And so you have to push them. And that means that you're not always going to be your favorite. You're their favorite person because you're their coach. And all great sports people that they go back and go, who is your favorite coach? It is never the one that was nicest to them, or they probably hated them at the time, because they were the ones that pushed them the hardest and made them be better tomorrow than they are today. And so in my opinion, it is helping people, but the mindset of I'm going to look at that end result of where I want to take this person and where they want to go, and do those things match. Right. And then if those two things match, then I have a position as a leader to say, I want to help you get there. You have to trust me that I'm going to help you get there. And when you build that kind of relationship, they will walk through walls for you because right. they know you have their best interests at heart. And if those don't align, you can't fix anybody. I mean, that's just not the way management works. It's not bullying. It's not, browbeating. It's not saying it just the right way. And, you do want to motivate your people, but ultimately it's about building a relationship with that person and saying, you have to trust me. I'm going to get you to a good place. You have to trust me. I'm going to do that. And then you guys work together to get to that place. And I think you really brought that forward really beautifully, because I think so much is misunderstood, and especially in healthcare. Ironically, I have a psychology degree as well. But one of the things that oftentimes what they do is they go, oh, you're really good at nursing, or you're really good at being a doctor. Right. Now, hey, be a manager now. Right. And they throw you in the middle of that without the right kind of training and emotional intelligence. I think they used to call it maturity. And, it was one of those things where, if you put somebody in that position, you're setting them up for failure, because right. they don't, they've experienced what management is. It doesn't mean they know how to manage.
You were a great scheduler. Now come be the leader of all the schedulers. Oh, you did a good job. Now be the leader of all of the people. Like, you're going to take that to the point of, where someone essentially has outpaced their ability to keep up with those promotions, and you're going to find that failure point. And I think that's why it's so important to invest. And again, I go back to understanding the context. I take, my leadership style and the way that I deal with people in context is, like most people, probably a little slice of this person and a slice of this person and a slice of this person. And I think back to when I first started in graduate school, and I was working for a couple of neuropsychologists here in town, Dale Heffaker and Steve Akeson, two guys that I really appreciate to this day. I was nervous about being in grad school. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't have anyone in front of me that was, here's what's coming, here's what you need to be prepared for. It was just, I was figuring it out on my own. And I started working with them, and everything was supported. Everything was kind of slow grown, and making sure that we had, excellence before they asked more of me, to the point where by the time I finished grad school, you could probably ask them. And if they hear this, they'll probably call me and be like, yeah, you were right. I was probably way too big for my britches by the time I finished graduate school, because I had been that guy that when I started classes in graduate school for certain, testing that we were being exposed to, I was already training on those tests to give those tests as part of the practice as working there. So I kind of went in with this, I know exactly what's going on. I'm going to be the big shot here. And it doesn't mean that those situations, I always tell people, don't mistake kindness for weakness. And if Dr. Akeson, Steve Akeson ever listens to this, I still hold on to this day. I had been training on a test, and it was a class that he taught. I worked with him. He taught me how to do this test at work. I took the class with him, and we had to write these report summaries. The test was the MMPI-2, and we had to write these test summaries based on score profiles. And I would go in, wait till the last minute, write my summary, turn it in, get my grade, whatever. And he had this policy that as we were first learning, the first couple reports that we turned in, he would give feedback. We could rewrite them and get a certain percentage of that back so we could kind of learn. Well, again, I knew what I was doing, right? I didn't need anyone's help. So I didn't redo any of them, right? I was like, I'll be fine. So we get the semester grades from the class, and I had an 89.6, a B. And I called Steve. I called him on his phone, and I said, what's going on with this? You gave me a B. I got an 89.6. And his only response was, did you help me? Did you redo any of those assignments? And I said, no. And he goes, enjoy your break. And that was the end of the phone call.
Boy, what a great coaching
And
moment.
I mean, that was probably 2005.
Yeah.
I mean, and here I am 20 years later, and I'm like, I still remember that phone call to him asking about that.
Yeah.
But again, you can be supportive in more ways than just you can do no wrong, right? That support was in the context what I needed when I needed it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, I mean, I've had the other side too. When I went on my, when I was doing my residency up at Kent State, this is one of those, in the moment, it was terrible. Looking back, I can't think of a more positive developmental phase in my professional career. I went up and I was working at Kent State University, truthfully in a residency that to this day I still feel like I had no business being there, in a very positive way for me. My mentor, my supervisor, a guy named Yossi Ben Parath, internationally known for the MMPI series of tests, the MMPI-2 RF, and getting in the weeds here for people that may not know these that listen to, but it's for a guy coming out of a freestanding school, a PsyD program in Springfield, Missouri, to work with Yossi Ben Parath would be like taking your little leaguer to get hitting lessons from Freddie Freeman. Like it was a big deal. To this day, I still have no idea. I had run into him at several conferences. I was that guy that, I wanted to present whenever I went to a conference. So he and I had interacted. He had seen me present. I have to think that's what led to this, but he invited me to come do my residency with him. And I was feeling pretty good about myself. I got this big fancy residency with this guy that could open hundreds of doors wherever I wanted to go. And I showed up on day one and I walked into his office and I sat down with my pencil and my notepad, which anyone who listens to this and knows me, I never take a pencil and a notepad anywhere. Showed up with a pencil and a notepad. I sat down and I said, what do you want me to do? And he kind of leans back in his chair, stretches his back, and he goes, get out. And I was like, excuse me? He goes, get out. And I just remember that was the longest walk down the hall back to my office. I thought I literally moved my wife and at that time, like 6-week-old daughter from Tampa, Florida to Kent, Ohio. And I literally day one, hour one, get kicked out of my supervisor's office. And he calls me back in a little while later and I go down there and he's like, let me tell you one thing. You've graduated. This is your postdoctoral residency. If I have to come tell you what you need to be doing, we've got a problem. And I spent the next 18 months in that residency. At the time, looking back, I hated it. He would email at all hours of the night. And I felt because of that first interaction, he never implied this to me. He never told me. So again, if he hears this, there was not an implication on his part that if he emails me at midnight, I respond. It was a pressure that I put on myself because I thought, man, day one, I'm already way down in the hole. I've got to work to get back out. Yeah. And I spent 18 months trying to do everything that I could to do well. Ended up, we started a research group with his students. Ultimately, we got 2 papers published in 18 months. We did a lot of really good things. I used that as a springboard to connect with one of my old supervisors. We ended up doing an edited book together that we published through Oxford University Press. Doors that opened through this relationship. And at the time, I could not wait to leave Ohio. It was the worst thing. I hated it. And I'll tell you, if I look back now, it was the coaching that I needed, right? It's when you were in grad school, you had the safety net, you had that stuff. You're a postdoc now. This is your last chance to figure out how to spread your wings before there is no safety net. And I tell my leaders now, I'm going to treat you like what you're becoming, not like what you are. And so if my managers desire to become a director or an administrative director or a VP, whatever that is, I want to start expecting of them the same way that he did of me. I'm going to expect you to be of what you want to grow into, because if I wait and coach you on how to do that job till you're in it, you're already behind.
Yep.
And again, I take a little slice of that time, working with Dr. Ben Parath. I take that slice of working with Dr. Halfacre and Dr. Akis, and those are people professionally that really kind of molded all the different ways that I see leadership. But you're right, to just go in and say, my job duty is build culture. That means nothing. I mean, you could replace culture with the number 7 and it makes just as much sense. It's this abstract concept with no connotation. And that's why I've really changed my mindset on, at the highest level, what is my job? My job is, if I lead people through change successfully, the financial benefit, the culture benefit, all that stuff is a symptom of that cause. And so that's what we really focus on, is we want to get the cause right. We want to get the problem right, and then the outcome of that problem will be all those other positive things that happen. So,
absolutely. I was fired from Blockbuster.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I was fired from Blockbuster. I think it
hopefully
was
not recently, right?
Not recently. I don't even know. Is there a Blockbuster around? I don't know. But I don't know where I was in my journey. I may have still been in high school, but I had applied at a Blockbuster, did one day of training, was supposed to be at a meeting on Saturday morning. It was an all hands on deck meeting, and I missed it. And immediately got a phone call.
Wow.
And I was fired immediately. And I didn't miss a meeting after that.
Yeah.
It was a career changing experience. And I tell my leaders that too. It's that you're pushing your people to be better tomorrow than they are today. And sometimes that means asking them to leave, but it's also, you have to take it from a standpoint that everything you do is about trying to help them because you know that there's going to be somebody after you. Right. And they're also going to maybe be in that position, and you have to demonstrate what that looks like to them. And you also have to help them. You have to be the one person who's going to tell them the truth, so that they don't run around thinking they're running into walls and don't understand why, because nobody took the time to say, here's the deal, and try to really help them from a career standpoint. Because a lot of times I think manager gets a bad connotation, because there's all these horror stories about people who should not be in management, in a management position. And that just says a lot about the leadership of that company. But ultimately it's all about great leaders and great managers working with people to try to get them all moving in the same direction. Because, we have a greater purpose in that we're trying to help vulnerable people who need us. And so we can't have a lot of drama. We can't have a lot of, mediocre people. They all have to be great. They all have to be good at it. They all have to be engaged and want to be here, because otherwise you're going to see the same problems that a lot of people complain about the healthcare system, and that you've got, doctors that aren't paying attention or not, fully engaged, have a terrible bedside manner. You got nurses the same way, and that sort of thing in those positions, because they don't have great leadership to help them, one, gatekeep that we've got great people in those positions, but two, making sure that they have strong engagement in the position and understand their why when they show up to the table.
And I think that's, going back to kind of creating that expectation and teaching people how to be kind of the thing you want them to be. And I think that applies at all levels. My friend and I were having a discussion about what is culture, right? A lot of times we're kind of given this indication that culture is the person who's sitting in the cubicle next to me will be there 20 years from now with me. And I said, well, that's great, unless over 20 years you grow to resent that person because you're doing half of their job too. Right. And so the idea is, I want to set a guideline. I want to set an expectation for my team that, and again, here's my challenge to the other service lines at Cox Health. We are going to be the best service line. and we're going to talk every day like we're the best service line, and we're going to start to act like we're the best service line. And in that sense, if you act like it long enough, eventually we'll wake up one day and we will be the best one, right? And so how are we going to accomplish that? Well, I think that's where we really have to tune into being clear with our expectations. I believe it's Brene Brown has a quote, and she says, "Clear is kind." And when I think about setting expectations for my team, it's not wishy-washy. It's here's the volume expectation, here's the quality expectation, here's the time expectation, and we work around that. And it's we want to give people an opportunity to hit that goal before we start having conversations about it. But truthfully, what I have found is if someone's not meeting the mark, they've given no indication of meeting the mark, and because you're either afraid of that conversation or you're just afraid of how they might respond, you never hold them accountable to that. Number one, the only person you're going to frustrate in that is your high performer that's tired of doing that person's job. But you're actually going to make it less likely the person who's not doing their job ever leaves. Right? I'm a big fan of The Office. So Civil War and The Office, those are kind of my two movies. But, there's a quote from the character Michael Scott in The Office where he's talking about, and again, this is pre-presidency, but he's referencing Donald Trump on The Apprentice, right? And he's, that his catchphrase is "you're fired." And he goes, "I would never say that. I would say you're hired and you can work here as long as you want." And on the outset, right, we talk about culture, about people knowing that they have employment. But that's so counterintuitive to what makes a great business when you not only hire, but you tolerate continued mediocrity. I've got some staff that I check in with on a regular basis. And what I tell them is my job is to make sure if you're a high performer that you stay wanting to be a high performer. The one thing I've never had a high performer on my team ask for is for me to surround them with low performers. You'll never have that. And so if my high performers that I want to keep are demanding to be surrounded by other high performers, then that's where that conversation went with my friend is culture that person sitting in the cubicle next to you, or is culture knowing that I can take a vacation, knowing that when I come back, I don't now have 2 weeks worth of work because the week that I missed and the current week, because I've got a team of high performers that took care of me while I was gone so I could really have a vacation. And again, I think a lot of times we confuse culture with longevity. And I think those two are not, not interrelated. And they're, longevity is great if you've got people that continue to push the envelope.
Right.
But as soon as you start hiring C and D performers and matching them with your A and B performers, you're going to have a trend towards the mean, right?
Yep.
Everyone's going to end up being a C plus B minus. If you really hold people accountable and all you have is A's and B's, then the worst you're going to get is a B plus. And I think that is the way that we're kind of approaching how we build a team. And again, how we're going to win as a service line is you might get a job here, but it doesn't mean you get to keep it, right? There's an old story of a baseball manager having a conversation with his players, and he said, "My job is to find a better player than you at every position. Your job is to make sure there's not one out there."
Right.
I don't think that's bad advice.
No, it's not. And to quote Brene Brown in another area, she talks about one of the analogies was there's a school teacher and she'd have her students drop a marble in every time, and if they broke trust, they had to pour that jar of marbles out. And that's what the basis of trust is. It's just consistency, day in and day out, and being able to trust the people around you. And ultimately, as a manager, you have to trust your team to follow through and do the things that you need them to do. And the team needs to be able to rely on each other to do the things that they need to do. And that's what pushes each other. And that's what makes for a great team. And so ultimately, in my opinion, a great manager is somebody who can be consistent, pick great people, put those marbles in the jar and keep them in there and don't dump them out. But if you do, make sure you own it and make sure that they understand that the culture that you're building is on performance, on trust, that it's a privilege to be here, to be in the company, and that if you're here, it's because you're really good at what you do. And we're not going to allow other people who aren't good at what they do to stay.
Right.
And that ultimately, if you're going to put a label on what culture is in our company, it's really about them wanting to feel a sense of satisfaction because they got pushed harder. They got to do things they never thought they would be able to do otherwise. And it when they look back, they see years of, wow, I never thought I'd be here because, and that great coach walked them through that. And I love your stance on leadership and management. We could probably talk for hours and hours on it. But it's such good stuff, and I can hear the great leadership and management that you have, that how your psychology has served you well, and that stepping into a role where you're over cardiologists, which we didn't even dive into, what that was all about, but again, great leadership, and we've had several people from the Cox system here. They all have exemplified great leadership. They just have a great system there. Another thing I got to shout out for Cox is that they're local, and that's harder and harder to find these days.
Yep. No, the current CEO, Max Butos, is he and my senior vice president at the time were an administrative director and a VP. Max was the VP, and they're really the ones that hired me into my first leadership role. And I've always just been really appreciative. Max is probably one of the most honest people that I've ever met, whether you're ready for that honesty or not. And he's very caring in the way he delivers it. But I still remember a meeting we went into where I was kind of going in as his subject matter expert. And right before we went in, there was some news that came out that was kind of opposite of the direction that I had hoped the meeting was going to go. We went into the meeting, and rather than engaging, I was quiet and I was stewing. We got done with the meeting, and he pulled me in the office, and again, very compassionately, but very directly was like, I need to make sure you're with me on this. And I have never treated a meeting like that since. To, kind of to your story earlier, it's, you get fired for missing a meeting, you don't miss one after. And, that's just who he is. And at no point was it accusatory. At no point was it demeaning. Honestly, if anything, I got done with that situation and really like getting my talking to with more positivity afterwards than I did than before the meeting, because the message that was delivered was I didn't fulfill my role in the meeting, not because, and he wasn't mad at me because that didn't happen, but I was a member of that team going in. I wasn't an accessory to the meeting. I was a core component, and I had a role in that meeting, and he wanted me to know what I was bringing was important. And when you get told that you didn't hit the mark and you're one of the reasons that the meeting is occurring, you're like, I will never be unprepared for that situation again. And I just, having that ability to go over to a meeting over in the administrative area, and a lot of times the meeting will finish and I'll just walk down the hall, and I can walk by the office of our COO and say hello and ask if they need, if she needs anything. And it's very open door. And I can tell you from one leader to be able to talk to leaders at 2 or 3 levels above me, that if I knock on the door, they stop what they're doing and they will talk to you. They will address you. Again, I feel very confident with where we're at right now on the leadership side. So it is nice having that kind of local component, because it's not a phone call to another city or something else. It's, I can walk over the Sky Bridge, and if I need to, I can find an executive leader to have a conversation with. And that's a benefit that I make sure not to take for granted.
Yeah. Well, it takes 2 to tango. And so having a great manager, you have to have somebody who's open to being managed
Yep.
and wants to and seeks that, growth and sees it like that, because you could have easily walked away from that whole conversation, with a different attitude
Yep.
about it, and that you're like, what can I learn from this and how can I be better from it? That's the sweet spot,
Yep.
that's the perfect place. And I think that's where, leaders and managers really love, because they love their people so much, because they're like sponges. They absorb that information. And then, hopefully, you have an opportunity to give good feedback to them, when things don't go well on their side either,
Yeah.
and I hope that I always portray that to my team as well, that's a two-way street for sure.
Yeah. No, it's there's always something to learn. There's always a new thing to think about. There's always a new tactic to take. So it's every situation is an opportunity. And so you get out of it what you want to. And so it's a challenge.
Right on. We're an elder care podcast. We have people that are clinicians out there. We have people who are elderly themselves, and we have people who are young, who are taking care of the elderly. And some are elderly, or they're on the cusp of that. They're anticipating the next 5 to 10 years. What advice could you give to our audience that you would give to your own family related to healthcare and psychology and some of the issues that we talked about?
So I think the place that I would start is work with your physician. So much like I would, going back to my forensic training and the time that I spent in the federal prison system as an employee, let me be clear on that on the podcast. We would often answer questions like, can this individual work with their attorney? Do they understand the merits of the case against them? And as maybe kind of strange as it seems to apply that thought process to healthcare, I think we need to approach it in the same way as you need to be open and have the ability to work with your physician. You need to understand when the physician tells you what's going on. So what I tell people is, if you don't understand, right? If you're working with a physician who uses nothing but, long words or acronyms or other things like that, ask for clarification, or go home and research it, right? Find out kind of what it is. I think having kind of the present ability to understand what they're telling you, what that information looks like. And again, whether that's you as the patient or as a family member who's there with a patient, in certain situations, do your homework, work with the physician, understand that it's a collaborative relationship. A lot of times people go in, the doctor said it's this, it's only this, it can only ever be this. I will not research anything else. I will not look into it. It's only that. Again, you wouldn't do that if you were standing trial for a case and your attorney said, I think we need to plea. And you were like, I didn't do it. I don't want to plea. Like, you wouldn't just say, hey, whatever you want, right? Because you're the one, as the patient, you're the one that's going to have the outcome of whatever that treatment is. So again, kind of thinking about it like that, work with the physician, understand that it's a collaborative relationship, and understand what they're telling you. Ask questions to clarify. And I think this is where, again, this will drive us way back into a whole nother line of questioning, but I will be brief about it. But I think this is where AI will really help us. You brought up the whole idea of, AI-driven documentation, and that stuff is not just in the future. It's right now. We are rolling it out. We are piloting it. And I think what you're going to see is an opportunity where that 15-minute physician visit that was historically the physician asks you a question, and as you respond, they turn to their computer and type, and then turn back to ask you the next question, and then turn over and type. The AI documentation is going to give us an opportunity to be face-to-face for 15 whole minutes. The documentation software is going to pick up that conversation and create a record of that visit in a way that will allow you to ask more questions of the physician. It's going to allow the physician to spend more time explaining the acronym or the big fancy word that they just used. And I think that's where patients or family members need to take some power in that relationship and understand the collaborative nature of it. And truthfully, physicians get into medicine to help people. They don't get into healthcare to document.
Yeah.
And so if they can find a way to do less documentation because that part of it is being offloaded on something else, I guarantee you almost unequivocally, physicians will spend more time face-to-face with their patients. Use that as an opportunity to drive that conversation forward and be an active participant, right? Like we talked about earlier, that may be up to and including helping pre-cert your own procedure to get your insurance moving. You're the customer. Insist that it gets done. Being that collaborative partner in the process of healthcare is, I think, the most important thing you can do.
Right on. It's so good. And I think, just one more thing I'll play off of, making sure that, if the insurance is getting in the way, that they feel empowered to make that call. And, hopefully the clinicians who are out there listening will help empower them to do so and give them, the words, the terms that they need to use in order to get the healthcare that they need.
Yep.
So so good.
Yeah, you're right. It's, again, having the right piece of the puzzle is going to take both the patient and the provider, and in many cases the family member also. So again, it's a collaboration. It's not, this is not the great and powerful Oz. And honestly, I don't know that I want to speak for all of them, but I think most physicians would tell you they don't want to be viewed like that, right? I mean, the amount of pressure that puts on them to be the only one who can possibly be right and have input on this.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure, because if they miss the mark by even a little bit, the perception is you don't know what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And I think physicians much prefer for the process to be, kind of collaborative and really iterative, right? Like getting incrementally closer to the right solution, as opposed to, again, pass fail, right? You're either right or you're wrong.
Right.
It's just human nature. More often than not, we may be wrong on our first pass. And if you're either right or wrong, and if you're wrong, then I'm not coming back to see you again. It's a lot of pressure. And so collaborative is, I think, really the name of the game.
Well, I have a million more questions, and we could just talk for hours. But for the sake of your time, I'm gonna hold that for another day. But it has been so awesome to have you on our show.
Thank you very much.
We're glad you're in the position that you're in, and we're looking forward to seeing that new procedure coming down the pike and that new innovation that's coming around the corner, because it's really exciting. I get excited about it too. Yep.
No, we're always looking for the next big thing. So
thank you again.
Fantastic. If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
And we'd love to stay connected. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and on Instagram at In Good Company Elder Care Podcast.
You can also find us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at IGC Pod, and on TikTok at IGC Elder Care Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to In Good Company Elder Care in Your Backyard. I'm John Ray, and I've been joined by my amazing co-host, Spencer Ernst. Special thanks to our executive producer, Alex Wallace, for helping bring this show to life. Until next time, take care, and remember, you are always in good company.